So I'm delighted to introduce to you someone that most of you will recognise, a regular presenter at conference, Andy Barnetson. He's going to give us an update on extended producer responsibility, and which Frauke just touched on, and also Beyond the Box and the campaign around that. So can we have a warm welcome to Andy Barnetson, please?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be back. Delighted to see that we're running a little ahead of schedule. Thank you to the speakers beforehand for being so prompt. I'll do my best to overrun and get us back on track. We are going to cover the promotional campaign as well. Those of you who've seen me before, I used to speak just about the promotional campaign. Delighted to say we've got colleagues from our new PR agency. I'll introduce them in a moment. Last conference, I started introducing you to this new concept of EPR. And today, that's all I've got for you. So today is about extended producer responsibility. It's about what's happening legislatively, and most importantly, what do we need to do about it? Well, as I said to you last time, we are now entering into a period of sweeping changes to the packaging regs. When we met last conference, it was about to happen. It is now happening. There is there is a request from government, which is short of obligation. There's a request from government that you be acting already with effect from 1st January, and I'll explain what that means in a moment. And that will become mandatory very soon, possibly as early as Wednesday. I'll explain all of that. But in brief summary, first of all, there are 4 consultations. There's extended producer responsibility, the deposit return scheme, consistency of collection, and amendments to the PRN system. I'm going to touch on all of them very briefly. You will get the slides afterwards, so study them at your leisure. There's a lot here. I really need 25 or 30 minutes to do this justice, so I'm going to rattle through. If you've got questions, do catch me later on. PRN system continues. Whatever you're doing with PRNs now will continue till at least 26, 27. EPR, everything I say about extended producer responsibility is additional, above and beyond. So a lot of these slides are background information, just so you have a better idea of what's coming, and much of it is what do I actually need to do. We'll start with a simple one, DRS, Deposit Return Scheme. Simple because it does not apply to you. Unless you're making a plastic bottle or a tin can or a glass jar, which I assume you're not, then this does not apply. But we're going to hear about it because it comes into effect in Scotland in August. With effect from August in Scotland, if you're buying one of those products, you will need to pay 20 pence at point of sale. You'll need to take it back to one of these reverse vending machines to get your 20 pence back. Scotland has gone first. They have put a lot of time and energy into this. I wish them every success, but we wait to see how it's going to work. That comes to England, Wales, Northern Ireland in October 2025, in theory. And it's already complicated because while glass is in scope in Scotland, it's not going to be in scope in England. We've got the first complication that if you live right on the border, then you can cross the border to your own commercial advantage if you choose. We're going to have complications with glass not in scope in England. It's complicated. I'll say no more. I could go on at length. The second of those consultations, which really doesn't affect you too much, consistency of collection. This is about DEFRA saying to local authorities up and down the country, you will do this. You will collect these materials. You will do it in this way. That sort of harmony is very welcome. If government says that you will all collect paper and board separately, then we get a separate, better quality recycling stream. We get better recycling rates. That's a good thing. Consistency of collection done well will be the bit that actually makes a difference. This will be the bit, if it's done well, that will raise our recycling rates, that will do something good. And I should say, if I haven't already, we are entirely in favour of a system that raises recycling rates. If I sound critical or dismissive or overly emotional about this, it's because it's not going the way that it really should. But we've got the basis here for something that could make a real difference. But DEFRA has been desperately slow. They still haven't told us what's happening here, so we are not getting a useful system. Consistency is the bit that could change things for the better. Everything I'll say from here on is EPR. That's not really about changing recycling rates. It's about determining who pays. So what is extended producer responsibility? The idea is that the producer, and that's a really key word, the producer will pay for local authority collection. So when you or I put something into our curbside collection at home right now, we pay for that via our council tax. Local authorities are complaining they don't have the money. I entirely understand that. They're extraordinarily stretched. I understand. But EPR is basically about producer will pay. Producer will pay to a central body called scheme administrator, and that scheme administrator will put the money out to the local authorities. Now, I've chosen that graphic particularly because I think DEFRA has head in the sand is one place that I could describe it. I could describe them as having head somewhere else. I won't. The point is, they've said initially that the scheme administrator will have industry involvement. Great, thank you. We don't want to control it, but to be involved, thank you very much, because we have some ideas. They've changed their mind. Scheme administrator will be public sector. They've said that they're going to do this themselves. We consider it a very difficult job. When I met you last time for conference, they're saying this scheme administrator will be up and running by August. They're now saying it will be operational by the end of the year. And this is for a scheme that starts next year. So what's a scheme administrator going to do? Well, on the left, you have thousands of producers. I'll come to what producer is in a second. You have thousands of producer companies on the left. You have one single scheme administrator in the middle. You have hundreds of local authorities on the right. That scheme administrator, which does not, to the best of my knowledge, exist yet, will be public sector, and it will be handling something like £1.7 billion. That's pre-COVID, that's pre-Ukraine estimates. It's going to be at least £2 billion. It could be more of producers' money. That's industry money. Something like £2 billion to be fed through a public sector body. Now, there will be people in this room who could run an organisation like that effectively. I have no faith in government doing it. This organisation, at the very least, has to take in £2 billion from industry and farm it out to local authorities. That's a big job, but that's only part of it, because the real win comes when they say, local authority here, did you know that you're broadly the same in terms of citizens and demographics and rurality and all this sort of thing? They're doing better than you. Could you learn from them? That sort of drive for efficiency, which we need, probably won't come, in my opinion, if public sector is behind this. So what does this actually mean? Producer is typically your customer. Producer is typically the brand owner, the person who puts something into your packaging. But, and this is extremely important, I mentioned it to you last time, if your customer is below what's called de minimis, that means if their total turnover is below £2 million, if they're handling less than 50 tonnes of packaging, then you, as supplier of empty packaging, will pick up producer responsibility. Someone very sagely asked me last time, how will we know? And I said to you then what I thought was the case and what DEFRA has since confirmed. I'm sorry, but it's your responsibility. You're to engage with your customers and understand. I do have some very good news for you at the end of this, but this still stands. You're going to need to know if your customers are below de minimis. You're going to have to engage with them. If they're that small, they've probably not heard about any of this, so they'll wonder why you're asking. But you're going to need to know that. The communications from DEFRA have been appallingly bad. As some of you may know, I'm generally quite a nice guy. I don't like to be rude to people, but it has been an utter bloody shambles. Last year, when I came to see you last year, they were saying nothing. And industry was saying, for heaven's sake, DEFRA, talk to us, tell us what's going on. I've got a million questions. There have been newsletters, which are actually quite good. There have been webinars, which have not been very good. If any of you have been on the DEFRA Business Readiness Forum webinars, you'll know that some of them have been a complete shambles. There have been 1,000 people online, there have been questions and questions, and there have, on occasion, not been anyone from DEFRA who can answer them. There is actually a transcript of some of the questions that made it onto the Guido Fawkes satirical website. I can provide you links if you need. They've not run well, so we are not in a position where DEFRA is really helping us. But I can tell you this, what you have to do. Well, with immediate effect, you have currently a request from government, soon to become an obligation to collect data. You are presumably working with a compliance scheme on PRNs now. Continue to do that. Your compliance scheme is going to be your best friend on all of this. You need to speak to your compliance scheme to work out your specific company obligations. There is an online checker from DEFRA. I've been through it as if I was a sheep plant, and it says you must collect data. So be ready that with effect from 1st January, just gone, you are recommended to be collecting data from probably as early as Wednesday, the 1st of March. You will need by law to be collecting that data. It's pretty simple, knowing how much packaging you're putting on the market, down to the level of stretch wrap and shrink film, that sort of thing as well. Your compliance scheme will be able to help you, but you need to be able to do that. The complication is nation data. If you are supplying to one of those de minimis, below de minimis companies, you will need to say which country in the UK your packaging is likely to end up in. Again, speak to your compliance scheme. It is going to be critical, their role in all of this. So first obligation, collecting data, probably a legal requirement from Wednesday. Second obligation, not to be confused with your requirement to register online. So you can do the right thing in all of this, you'll have to register online. Thank you to Katie for changing my slides at the last second. DEFRA has just changed this deadline. You may have in your heads that you were to register online by Q2. It's now gone out to Q3. So the obligation for data collection is now. Registering online is Q3, and then also in Q3 to submit your half one data. Do it all through your compliance scheme, that's fine, but do make sure you're on top of what this requires. Payments, if any, will become due next year. The scheme administrator, assuming it's set up in time, assuming they can do it, they will send out invoices if you owe money. Now, this is the good news. Leonardo DiCaprio seems to have made it onto the second slide for today. The very, very good news, and I have never brought you better news than this, is that secondary packaging is going to be exempt. If what you're putting onto the market is secondary packaging, and this is still to be confirmed, and I still need to see the final definition, but if what you're putting onto the market is secondary packaging, then it is exempt. The key message in all of this is the packaging I'm putting onto the market, is it household or is it non-household? Not as simple, sadly, as whether it ends up in the household. It's much more complicated than that. This is DEFRA. But what they have said is secondary packaging, again, definition to be confirmed, will always be classed as non-household. It will always be exempt from EPR. That means that there's a very good chance you will all be exempt from EPR. That's a good thing. But bear in mind, this is an exemption from having to pay, which is different from the exemption for data collection. So if you are supplying to a company below de minimis, you may still need to know that, because you may be required to submit the nation data. So there may be a data reporting obligation. Again, your compliance scheme will tell you. But the important thing, hopefully, is that your secondary packaging will be exempt from having to pay any fees. That's extraordinarily good news. I was delighted when I heard that.
Is that a U-turn, or has that just been redefining?
Well, U-turn implies that they knew where they were going in the first place. But a good question, thank you, Tim. I think it's to be fair, I think it's a reclassification. They probably always intended that, but now they've just made it clear to us. So it really is extraordinarily good news. There is a new category of shipment packaging. So if you design corrugated deliberately for home delivery, for online, that sort of thing, that's shipment, not secondary, and that definitely is in for EPR. So will incur a fee. So that's it, final slide. Conclusions. Data collection obligation starts probably on Wednesday. We recommend that you do it. Recommend that you know what you've put onto the market since January, because if DEFRA does some sort of pro rata backdating, they're going to get it wrong if they just make an assumption from March onwards. So do have a pretty good idea of what you've put on the market since beginning of the year. Do be collecting that data. Do register your company online. Sorry, that slide should have changed as well. That's Q3. And do submit the data in Q3 as well. You will be the producer if you are supplying to a company below de minimis, but that will only be a data obligation, and it will not be a financial obligation if you're in secondary packaging. And speak to your compliance scheme. They can help you with your details. It's going to be a rocky road. The next few months as we settle into this are going to be interesting. The next few years as we shake out are going to be complicated. I will happily come back and tell you more as I learn. I flatter myself that I'm reasonably well informed on all of this, and it is not easy. If you're confused, then I don't blame you. It is a complicated thing. So that's it. Thank you. I will be around this afternoon if you've got questions over coffee or indeed over a beer at dinner time.